Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Douville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who isn't above looking into the mailbag when he doesn't have enough time to catch up with the game we're playing.
Oh, well, that's on the nose. Tim Longo.
Well, you know, we're going to have this one, so I'll explain what we're doing. We're going to do a mailbag episode this week. Actually, we probably could have done the regular cast, but we didn't know
close.
that.
I'm close.
Yeah, I was going to say, we didn't know that when we scheduled and figured out, and I did the emails and everything and planned for it. I'm traveling next week, which is the upshot of this. So we're going to put a second episode in the can. That'll be what you hear next week. That'll be continuing our Metroid Prime discussion. It just turned out to make more sense to do that one after we release the podcast this week. So in order to give you a little more time. As a result, I probably will not post in the Discord this time how far we're going to play to, because I will be gone and I'm hoping not to interact with computers while I'm gone, except in recreational ways. So yeah, I'm not going to be on the Discord. I'm not going to be in the Slacks. I'm not going to be on the Reddit, but I guess I couldn't afford to be anyway. That's an API joke.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's pretty. I got it, but that's pretty.
You got to be terminally online to get some of these jokes. So we're going to catch up with some mail. We had a lot of mail that was kind of building up, and it's kind of all over the place. I mean, there's a lot that has to do with GoldenEye, so we should definitely catch up on that, and it's just a good time to do all that. So these were sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. Without further ado, please, sir, will you read the first email?
Okay, subject.
I gave you all the long ones.
Okay, great. Subject, comments on GoldenEye 007 from Gonzale. I will say it that way. This is Gonzale from Valencia, Spain. I'm even more confident in my pronunciation, but you tell us if I got close at all. I'm listening to your current series on the N64's GoldenEye 007. Parts 1 and 2 are available so far. After having listened to some of the older episodes, such as your series on Anachronox, I find your podcast to be fun and interesting in the way you analyze the games, and this applies to your series on GoldenEye. I'm liking a lot of your analysis of the gameplay, such as how objectives were probably innovative back then, but at the same time, their implementation felt sometimes obtuse since the medium hadn't yet evolved regarding how to make everything clear and natural for the player. As a personal experience, when GoldenEye came out, I was 13, a Nintendo gamer, and also a PC gamer. I remember that at the time, I didn't like Doom because it was too frightening and nerve-wracking for me, understood. And same with Doom clones I had tried, including Quake by then. Thus, I initially dismissed GoldenEye as another Doom clone holding no interest for me. Luckily, a close friend did get the game, and when I tried it at his place, I was shocked to find out how different it was from my experiences, my expectations, and how much I liked it. I felt it was very innovative. The game wasn't about being cornered in dark corridors, but its first stage was open air, and you could try to sneak on enemies rather than being surprised by them. I was immediately hooked by some of the things that I felt were fresh and which were showcased by the first level, many of which you have already mentioned in your podcast. Number 1, large, bright, open-air setting, somewhat based on the film. Number 2, the hit location-based enemy animations using their words, if I remember them right. Yes, those are awesome. The sniper rifle. In part 1, you mentioned MDK and Outlaws, which were released the same year and also had sniping with zoom. I think it's interesting that these 3 games came out this year, and I feel GoldenEye must have had a large role in popularizing the sniper rifle in FPS games. Number 4, mission objectives. The goal isn't anymore just to kill enemies on sight, find some keys, and get to the end of the level in one piece. Yeah, that's Doom. Number 5, in additional mission objectives in harder difficulty levels. Hard doesn't just mean anymore that enemies are tougher and you are easier to kill. It also means you've got new and more complex things to do. 6, stealth. You have the option to sneak up on your enemies, and I think some objectives encourage the player to choose stealth over willy-nilly shooting. As I said, I'm liking a lot of your comments on the game, and I think your analysis is interesting and accurate. Okay, a little bit of editing here, I think.
Yep.
Regarding the game's controls, while they were limited because only a single analog stick was available at the time, I would say the Switch emulated version doesn't provide an accurate impression of how precise they were. Since, as you mentioned, aiming precisely in the Switch version is a pain, while I remember using the sniper rifle or aiming at alarms and cameras was a lot of fun on the N64. Well, I remember. It might be that back then we settled for less, but I still think the Switch version has specific problems related to stick sensitivity, setting aside the very different button placement. I agree. Which I think we talked about.
Yeah, we covered that in detail. Yeah,
specifically
that's one thing that happens when we when we read emails in there.
Yeah,
like a month later, no less. After we finish the thing, so
yeah, the N64 throw on that stick is like night and day.
Way different
for the Switch. Thanks for the podcast. Keep up the good work. I look forward to the next episode of GoldenEye and future games, and I hope you keep enjoying making the podcast for a long time. Although you already did Republic Commando a while ago on the podcast, now that you have analyzed even more games, which early FPS games would you say had a stronger influence on the design and gameplay of Republic Commando? Are there any games that maybe you weren't as familiar before that you would now add to that list? For example, because of them being precursors to some specific design or gameplay elements. Best, Gonzale.
I can't help you there. No idea.
I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think we wear a lot of our influences on our sleeves as far as Republic Commando goes.
Metroid Prime.
Yeah, the game we're playing now, Halo. The other thing, I mean, the thing with Halo that we mixed up a little bit, one, we moved the jump button, which was a huge deal. I bet there are people who are still arguing about that from our team.
Religious debate.
And we tried to broaden out the weapons to be more than just the two. So we had a fictional way that we did that. And I think that was to actually tie in a little bit more to our own shooter history, which was more PC based. So those are some things I can remember kind of right off the dome. But all of those are influences that we knew about. I mean, I played so many shooters back then. The only reason I didn't play GoldenEye was that it was Nintendo 64, which was already kind of, GameCube wasn't out yet when I started in the industry, but I was playing basically the PlayStation 2 a lot, and before that, just entirely PC. So I just never got back to some of those titles on that console, but or anything for that matter on like a Sega system. Not that I would call those a first-person shooter haven by any means. So I think we really... Oh, and the Rogue games, Rogue Spear or whatever.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I assume we must have talked about the Rainbow Six games when we did the series,
Rainbow Six,
right? So Rogue Spear was the second one.
Right.
But
that's the one I specifically remember playing with.
That one had a lot more. I would say a lot more. Had a bit more focus on multiplayer.
Yeah,
so, co-op. But the first one did too. But yeah, that one. If we hadn't talked about that one, the Rainbow Six games of the era were definitely an influence. Yeah.
If you go all the way back to I can think of some other games we played at the time just that were kind of in the air. So SWAT 4 is one that we played, which was done by Irrational, and actually in our interview with Ken Levine, he brought that up. Is like how we kind of took the squad gameplay about as far as you could. Some of the sort of controlling the squad in the I forget what we called them, but sort of like their attitude, like where they were kind of moving ahead. Or
stances.
Yeah, the stances was influenced a little bit by, I think it was called Freedom Fighters.
Oh yeah, Freedom Fighters. That was an IO interactive game.
Yeah, so that's another one I could think of. But other than that, no. I mean, there was just adding a lot of Star Wars into that. I think those are all the sort of games that come off the top of my head that I can remember us discussing at the time, or playing, or talking about, and certainly your Unreals as well. It being an Unreal Engine game, but yeah, those are the ones. Thanks for that. Sorry for the late response. I should just say that for all of these emails. I think this one is even older that I've got here. It doesn't tie to GoldenEye. It actually goes back further. I probably should have started. This is from Alex Epton. Data in indie games is the subject. Hey guys, real name Alex Epton here. I'm a hobby game developer making prototypes and some jam games in Unity. A friend of mine, another hobby game dev, recommended your show to me, and I've been nonstop listening back through old episodes in the weeks since. I really appreciate all the deep dives into design and mechanics. Here's my question. You guys talked about data in the Deus Ex episodes and how it was one of the first games that really tracked a lot of stuff about how you played and gave you feedback on your style and choices. You mentioned the importance of getting lots of data / heat maps, etc., especially in AAA and mobile, to help compete and min-max profits and engagement. So here's my actual question. Brett, you mentioned you're working more in indie games now. How important is data to the current games you are working on, and in what ways? Are there any fun, non-achievement related things you'd like to put hooks in? Thanks. Loving the show, Alex. Well, thanks, Alex, if that is your real name. You said it is, but can we really trust that? Such a common name, Alex. Anyway, I'm not still working in indie games. At the time, I was working on strategy-focused games, is my recollection, in which case we wanted to track, even in an indie game, what choices players were making in different things, sort of like Walking Dead did with its 32% of players chose this, this character over that character, those sorts of decisions, not necessarily to surface it to the players, but more like Walking Dead did, which I thought was a pretty good gimmick, but to just sort of to just know, like, here was a really tough decision because it's split pretty equally, or to have more data about players and be like, oh, this person's clearly role playing this type of decision maker, to do it in the broadest possible terms. So that's my recollection at the time. Those were plans that we were working on at the time, and since then I left those particular projects, and so I don't know if anything came of those decisions, but that's where things we were talking about at the time, and that's probably what I had in mind. I don't remember. I'm not even sure what year we played Deus Ex in. So there you have it. There, I read a bunch and I responded, and Tim didn't have to say a thing. So now I'll throw it back over to you, Tim.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, it's a good question. It's a deep, hard one that it really has a lot.
Well, I mean, maybe you should talk about the data. You've done a lot more data mining probably than I have.
No. I mean, as far as like trying to predict what to go, all I was going to say was that it just has so much to do with the game.
Yeah.
It's hard to classify what the best thing is for any game, but yeah, it's a good question, and I think all I'll say is just to encourage. I over the years, I will say, underappreciated that effort. And I think it's something that always in my experience, blindsides developers on the amount of work it takes, as well as the importance of it. It's sort of like once you ship, there sort of starts dawning on you what you should you should have been collecting this whole time, because you're trying to make a decision on what to do next. And it sure, not that that's how all decisions are made, but it sure would be a great data point to help inform a decision. So I would, really like try to think about everything you can for your particular game about what you might want to know from player behavior.
Yeah. And internally too, I mean, a lot of what we talked about apparently was, using it to inform QA, or just to know, like, that the game has been played in these I probably was referring to Skyrim, where I think we had a heat map. I know Halo's had heat maps, and and that was even player facing in some of the versions of Halo.
Mm-hmm.
So that stuff is it's valuable from that standpoint. Helps with balancing information as well, especially for multiplayer games. Like there's a million reasons why you want the data, but knowing which data, because there's a cost, right, to tracking and presenting that information. So you got to really think about what you need to know.
That's the just to share an additional thought there that I think, especially I would assume for indie developers, is an extra challenge. There's identifying the data, capturing the data, but then surfacing even internally and analyzing the data, which we would call business intelligence. There's telemetry, which is like deciding what you're going to capture and then capturing it and then having that. But then the business intelligence side is like, okay, we have it. We've put it through Tableau or some software like that, and now we're looking at these charts and numbers and just endless data. And then what do you do then, right? Like that's like the third step that I think is also underestimated. So anyway.
Yeah, I recommend there's a podcast. I don't think it's still running, but it's a live ops podcast called The Art of Live Ops, I believe. And I recommend, if you're somebody who's curious about that, you can look for people who've done games similar to what you're doing. They talk to a lot of different developers who have made all different sorts of games, from MMOs to
cool.
One of the hosts did Maple Story, so I guess that's an MMO, but it's kind of a little different from your WoWs or whatever.
Yeah. Social MMO.
Yeah, it's more social. And they talk a lot about, what to do with the huge amount of data you have. They had Steve Maretsky on for example. So,
wow.
Interesting. He's a definite free to play guy, and a pioneer and a lot of that stuff, even though he got to start at Infocom. He's been around for a while. Anyway, so if you're looking for more thoughts about those sorts of things, you could probably mine that podcast quite a bit. It's not something I don't talk about it a lot here because it's not something I've done tons of, but I guess it's come up. So anyway, let's move on.
All right. I am actually trying to get him to come on, by the way.
Ooh.
Okay, but we need a reason. But we'll find a reason.
We just bring him in for Infocom.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Done. Yeah, but okay. So GoldenEye 64 from Sam Bates. Thanks for covering this game. I was 14, 15 when this game came out, and I, along with most people in my school, was obsessed by this game. Lots of great memories. I daren't play it now on the Switch because I can imagine the control screen ruins the experience. Since we're all nerds, I don't mind correcting you. Since the dish in the game/movie isn't a satellite dish, at least in real life, it was a radio telescope. The Arecibo,
I think.
Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. When I was a postdoc doing astronomy, I got to visit Arecibo a couple times, and let me tell you, the climb up to the feed where Sean Bean falls from is a scary one. A great experience. In their lecture theater were movie posters including GoldenEye and Contact. Oh yeah, Contact. Mm-hmm. The telescope partially collapsed in 2020 after a big storm. Getting to visit that place while it stood was great from a scientific point of view, but for me, it was amazing from I'm in the game perspective. Love your podcast. I'm an avid listener. Best wishes, Sam Bates. Yeah, it's funny. Little did they know that he went there for astronomy and didn't really care about that. He just wanted to be James Bond.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Also interesting. Sam Bates, SB, Sean Bean.
Oh, yeah.
Could we have a famous listener in the audience?
Sean
if that
Bean
is your real name,
in.
Sam Bates. Yeah, there's sorry about that. I knew that at one point. Like I knew first of all it was a radio telescope. I just I don't know, in the moment, when we're talking, sometimes you just kind of lose stuff. So that is the thing, but I appreciate the correction. And I actually knew it was in Puerto Rico. I would have not been able to come up with with the name, and I did read about it collapsing. I was a physics undergrad. I actually had some, people in my classes at the time who went on into astrophysics, and did continue to do research in that area today. So, and I wonder if they ever worked there. I have to track some of them down. But yeah, I bet I would not have been able to climb up to that. So kudos to you. That is not a thing I could do. But I've had that same experience of being in a place that's in a game. That for me, it's usually an Assassin's Creed game. Walking around in Rome some years ago, and to a lesser degree Florence, I would just look at a building and be like, "Oh my god, I've climbed all over that building," and just have that moment of like,
I assassinated a person there.
I killed somebody right inside that window.
And then you said it out loud in a tour, and they're like, "What?"
It was a really wild experience to have that. I don't think I've been. Can't remember if I've been to any other place that the U.S., but that was colonial U.S. So there are some buildings in and around Boston that I look at and I'm like, oh yeah, that's not bad. That's recognizable. But Rome was the one where I was like, whoa, that's really creepy how accurate that game is. So I've had that same experience. So anyway, back to me. Thanks for writing in, Mr. Bean. Email 2 for me is from Brett Baptist, a great son of John, I believe. GoldenEye 64 reflections from an elder millennial. Gentlemen, long time, first time here. I'm sure you'll get plenty of commentary on multiplayer shenanigans. My neighborhood's favorite was Pistols, License to Kill, Temple. No ob job, Natch. But I wanted to also bring up the fun of the single-player mode, but with your friends gathered around the CRT taking turns to beat the 00 agent difficulty in the required time to unlock cheats, such as the archives in 1:20 to get invisibility. One of my favorite teenager year memories was my close friends and I trying to beat the secret Egyptian level. There's a room with the golden gun with tiles that trigger booby traps. So we had to create a map of the room on paper and trial and error our way to beating the puzzle.
Wow.
Great times, great game, great podcast. Thanks both, and looking forward to the next episode. Best, Brett Baptist. Yeah, that is, we played the Egyptian level. Well, the multiplayer version.
There's an unlockable single player, I think, too.
Right, there is, and I assume you could do that by completing some level or some difficulty level, which we
might have I looked it up at some point and I thought there was. Oh no, it is I think it's based on objectives.
Okay, yeah, I definitely did. It definitely didn't show up for me. I knew it was there because I still had the spots, but to fill out. But
there's 2 or 3, I think. Yeah,
there's 2
bonus levels.
Yeah, there's 2. We played the other one in multiplayer as well, I believe.
It's like a temple, like in the jungle or something.
Yeah, I don't remember the specifics, but yeah.
Or maybe it's the moon? No, I don't remember.
That's no moon.
That's no moon.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I love that everybody had their favorite Pistols, License to Kill, Temple. I assume they also had a big piece of cardboard taped, maybe 2 pieces of cardboard intersecting the screen. So let's go on to email 3.
Okay. Horror replays and remakes. Blarg42. Hi, Blarg. Greetings once more, my favorite game clubbing devs.
We do club them here.
I see how they spelled favorite too, so that's a giveaway about where they are. It's been a while since my last correspondence, another giveaway. But when I noticed you did a mailbag episode, I knew I had to come out of hiding. I've been meaning to write for a while, and as I've kept putting it off of the list of topics keeping growing. The list of topics keeps growing, so I probably send 2 mails if you don't mind. First off, I have a minor complaint about your otherwise excellent Dead Space episodes. All right, good. I like these. Basically, I was kind of disappointed that you both chose the one weapon approach, and I actually think it may have caused the downfall of Tim's playthrough. Interesting. I don't think there was any problem in Brett's case, since the game seems designed to fully support the plasma cutter only run, but unlocks the one gun trophy, which unlocks one gun trophy. But I really do think the same. I really don't think the same is true for the pulse rifle. Maybe it's possible to beat the game with no other weapons, but it's not easy. And I assume turns late game fights into tiring slogs of hold down the trigger until enemies eventually fall apart. Anyway, I shall gripe no longer. As a wise listener once said, it's your podcast and you can do what you want with it.
Like, for example, throwing a mailbag episode into the middle of a series.
Yeah, that's true. Huh? We're definitely... Listen, we're living in chaos right now, folks. So just,
we're off the magnetic rails here.
Deal with it. Nice. But as Tim hinted, he might go back to finish it. I just wanted to suggest that he consider abandoning his pulse. I put so many. Oh wait, can I read? Can you extract the?
I think you can.
The nodes?
I think it's expensive.
Yeah,
I think you
so
lose
many nodes.
Oh, you know what you can do is you can sell the upgraded weapon.
Oh, that's right. And then
that's how you
buy.
do it. We did talk about it, but it is possible to do it. Yeah.
I don't know, Blarg. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I think I might maybe stop upgrading because it's super upgraded, and then maybe I'll do a second one. Anyway, it will make the game easier, and more importantly, well, the funny thing is I feel like the pulse driver is making the game easier. And more importantly, much more enjoyable as well. Okay, well that's debatable, but I understand. Most of Dead Space weapons, like the plasma cutter, are made to encourage medium to close range combat, which keeps attention and scares alive, as keeping your enemies closer yields the best results. The pulse rifle being a notable exception. For example, the line cutter is like a super gun. Oh, line gun. Sorry, I always do that. The line gun is like a supersized plasma cutter capable of cutting through multiple necromorphs at once, and has a timed mine on alt fire, which detonates a few seconds after you place it. Yeah, I used the line gun quite a bit in my old playthrough long ago. The force gun is like a sonic shotgun. Okay, I don't think I use this. Basically, useless at long range, but can totally blast necros apart when they're close enough. And my personal favorite is the saw gun / ripper, which holds out a rotating saw blade at arm's length and can become completely OP with upgrades. In fact, I thought Tim was going to mention this weapon when he said he'd broken the game before he surprised me with talking about the pulse rifle strat, as a Ripper can essentially do the same stun locking maneuver, but more effectively. In any case, whether you take my advice or not, I really hope Tim gets back to Dead Space because it's among my all-time favorite horror games and has a lot to offer if you don't just use its most generic weapon. And he put in a tongue sticking out face. He did that multiple times to mock me. Also recommend Dead Space 2, less scary but equally good in its own right, and does even more with its 0G sections. I will comment on this at the end, Bart. I guess I should throw in a question here. So speaking of horror games, what are your thoughts on all the horror game remakes coming out these days? I feel like there's an unusual amount of remakes coming out of that genre these days, between Capcom's remakes of 1, 2, 3. Well, they didn't do one really. I mean, if you're talking about the old one, the old remake. Now 4, Dead Space, upcoming Silent Hill remake. It seems like nearly every classic horror game is getting a modern upgrade. You could even add the System Shock remake to that list, or Callisto Protocol, which, as you mentioned, is kind of a reboot of Dead Space. I have some theories about why horror games are getting so many remakes, but as industry veterans, what are your thoughts? Once again, sorry for the long-winded email, and never forget, when in doubt, surrounded by flesh-eating space monsters and all hope seems lost, there's always Pang. Nice punchline. Until next time, Blarg 42.
There is indeed always Pang.
What the hell is Pang? We don't know.
We don't know. Nobody knows. But
even Ian.
There's always Pang. Yeah, even Ian doesn't know what Pang is. The remake question, like, of two minds about it. I mean, the one thing I want is I want the preservation as well, which is the sticky widget here. Like, I feel like a lot of these, even with Resident Evil 1, we didn't play the original Resident Evil 1, although I think it was pretty faithful. And it was probably closer to a remaster than a remake.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I feel,
I know there are some significant.
The original is,
The original has when we talked about it on that somebody sent in mail and sent links with the video and stuff like that. I mean, there are definitely differences. I did play part of that. Like, I didn't like the save system. I was PC player and was like, I can't save whenever I want, and just like put it down. But I understand the choices when we talked about that stuff a lot. I mean, I think that. I mean, that's for me. I mean, that's, we do this podcast. Though I do like experiencing those games as, just having a different vision on the, on the existing thing. I'm when they come a little more, they get closer to sort of the action horror games. Like, I get it. It's like, yeah, those are fun. Like, I've enjoyed the new Resident Evil, so I get going back and taking the originals and putting them more in that mold. I just don't want to lose those originals, That's the thing that I worry about.
Business.
Yep, business. The business.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a good question. I hadn't thought about it, but when you mention it that way, you're right. There are a lot of remakes. It's like movie franchises and TV franchise remakes, right? They're sort of generational. He described himself as an old millennial, I guess, or whatever he said.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was the previous. That was the
previous one. Yeah, it was the previous one.
Blarg, I forget. But anyway, Blarg's 42. I'm going to say. But I don't know. It's like, is there a glut of horror remakes? I guess there is. Partially Capcom's fault, because they found a formula that they're repeating, right? And they have an engine that's quite good, and they're making new games with it. But they're also like, well, we have a good formula to repeat these other ones. But I'm trying to think of other remakes out there that are not like, we had the Demon's Souls remake, which is supposed to be pretty good. Shadow of Colossus was pretty good.
That's not a horror remake, though.
No, that's what I'm trying to say. Is like I'm trying to refute his. I'm trying to refute that it's horror games specifically that are being remade. That I'm wondering if it's actually more of a generational thing where these companies know that these kids played these games back then and have fond memories.
Yeah,
and so
Medieval got a remake or whatever. I mean, it's like, really?
Yeah,
like
that's a weird one.
It's like, so they're just kind of throwing whatever at the wall to see what'll stick, right?
God, somebody who doesn't really do remake. Well, I guess they did that one Link's Awakening.
Yes.
But Nintendo doesn't really do remakes very often, do they?
We are playing the Metroid Prime remaster.
But it's not.
It feels
not
more like
very
a
often.
remaster, though. Yeah, it is relatively unusual for them.
Yeah,
they're more likely to support a virtual console. I mean, in a way, they're kind of the best and the worst in that regards. Like, they'll have something that's emulated and is pretty similar. They'll charge you through the nose.
Yeah,
for
it's
the
worst
service,
of both worlds.
But then it's not. They take it away. It's like the Wii had a whole bunch. Like, you could buy tons of stuff on that virtual console, and then they just shut it down like a month or two ago, and now you just, like, all these games that you could get on that system are now not available again. It's like, it's almost like the Disney model. You put it in the vault.
Yeah.
And
they're learning bad
every
habits.
10 years we bring out 20 years, we bring out a new version of Mary Poppins, and like, hey, if you want to have Mary Poppins, it's not going to be available for another 15 years, so you better buy it now.
Those jerks.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about
it. Doesn't work anymore. I mean, really, because of, are they doing that with Disney Plus? I don't think they are. I think they're just putting everything up there.
That's possible, yeah. I mean, that model may have kind of sailed for Disney, but terms of
Nintendo, still a little bit.
Nintendo's still
old school.
Yep. I think you're right. I think there are quite a lot of remakes, and it's just because there aren't a lot of horror games in any given year that it really stands out.
Yeah.
I think is the bigger thing. Um,
Well, also like horror, we know even though those games do well, especially Capcom's do quite well for. I think statistically, we know that survival horror games are. It's not that they're niche, but they're also not like, they're not going to reach Call of Duty numbers and stuff. So I'm wondering, and this is a off the top of my head theory at this point because I didn't have time to think about this question, but as far as like if I think about it from a business perspective, from a risk mitigation perspective, doing a completely new Resident Evil game versus remaking, even though these remakes, the RE remakes are quite different from the originals, but there's, because they're built on that one structure. The business case probably is better if they can make a really good one, which they did with 2 and 3, and it sounds like 4 as well. Then it's, you hit the nostalgia beat, but you also hit this game's really good beat, and we didn't have to reinvent the wheel mostly, right? We just made the wheel better. Business wise, it seems to make a lot of sense because survival horror games don't come up that often because they're a little bit risky to do, and and a little bit niche. So
they're also a good way to backfill for people who have played 7 and 8. I think part of it too is like when you say it's a generational change, it's also like like the player base. There's now a group of young people who are seeing these new games that are in these long running series, and the earlier titles are not easily available to them. So there's an opportunity for somebody who has a lot of time on their hands and maybe has parents with disposable income, or a summer job or whatever, will kind of go to them and say, hey, you like that 7 and 8? We've got more of that. We've got these back catalog, games that we've remade. Like there's a chance to get a new generational bite of the apple, for that. It's actually something Darren and I talked about once. God, like in the first couple of years, I was
about 40 years ago,
for a million years ago, back at the dawn of time. Where
about Stinnett?
Yeah, Darren Stinnett. We were talking about just sort of reimagining properties, as you. Because he was, I think we were talking specifically about TIE Fighter or X-Wing, and just the opportunity to take those and present them again to a new audience. And how often would you do that? Like, was it a thing that you could reasonably do? Because the hardware just ages out, right? So of course, expectations change and everything. So unless you're doing something like we're doing or doing something similarly academic, a lot of people don't enjoy going back. I love black and white films, but growing up, my sister sure didn't. She was like, "Why isn't it colored?" It's just, so it's like, sometimes you just can't reach the audience because they just can't see past the technical limitations, or their own just sort of expectations, right? And so this is a way to provide that for those folks. And obviously there's a business case. I think there's some of those, but I don't really know.
I think Capcom. I do think this question is a commentary on Capcom specifically, though, because I don't think Dead Space or Silent Hill exists without Capcom's successes in this area. And I totally agree with you on they are doing a good job at franchise management in my perspective, because they definitely want new generations to play. They're not the new generations are not going to want to go back and play Resident Evil 2. The original. There's no reason even to port it, because I just don't think that, but if you can make a good modern version of it that stands toe to toe, which I still haven't played those, but stands toe to toe with like 7 and 8, then, why not? And I think that's just good IP, IP management.
And there's also an internal business case to be made as well, where you've got, a team of a ton of, artists, and animators and what have you, while the designers are figuring out what the next game is going to be, and the engineers who are going to support it. You can take a large part of your content team and go back and say, okay, well, we don't have to figure out the design or the programming on this one. We can take this engine we've got, take this team of people we have who know how to build this stuff, and while that other team's in pre-production, we can be basically from day one in production on the remake, right? Because we're going to take what we have as far as the modern formula of these games, and adapt it to that other thing. It just takes less it's a good place to put people who are kind of up and coming for leadership. Like there's a lot of sort of internal management reasons why you might do it as well, which I know is something they've also been trying to do with Nintendo games. They've been trying to step back and let new leaders emerge in some of those games to try to train up a new generation of designers, because the Miyamotos of the world are not going to live forever, much as we might like them to. So
yeah, I will tell you though, I would love to play a first person version of Resident Evil 1. That would be, because obviously having played 7 and 8 on stream and really liking those games, that would be fun.
Why is this happening?
Oh, my hands are so scarred at this point. Adjust my hands.
I really enjoyed 8. I had a lot of fun with that.
I think 8 is maybe a better video game.
Yeah,
but I liked 7 more.
Oh, I love the horror of 7, especially at the beginning of it in particular. Yeah, being in that house and just being like, was good scares. All right, I've got one here from Michael. The subject is hit scan in GoldenEye. GoldenEye has a very smart solution to the problem of how to make AI with hit scan weapons fair that I wish more games would use. When an AI character decides to shoot you, they make a note of your current position, then play an animation where they aim their gun and finally shoot at the original stored location. So in order to avoid being shot, all you have to do is be somewhere else by the time the animation finishes. Or you could shoot them first to trigger a stagger animation, of course. By taking advantage of these techniques, a skilled player can consistently avoid taking damage, which gives the combat a lot more depth than most hit scanner games. Enabled by this rigorous design, GoldenEye and its spiritual successors Perfect Dark and Timesplitters 2 really shine on their higher difficulty levels. The experience of completing a mission on 00 Agent is akin to pulling off a heist. You need to come up with an efficient route through the level to hit every objective without wasting HP or ammo, have a plan for every room, and execute all of it in sequence. It's an extremely daunting task, but the, quote, fairness of the AI makes it an achievable challenge. And the most ingenious part is that if you've been playing the difficulty levels in order, you've already spent a decent amount of time casing the joint. This heist-like design is supported by rock-solid fundamentals, fair, quote-unquote, combat, great hit reaction set, etc., did a far better job of fulfilling the quote-unquote secret agent fantasy for me than any scripted set piece ever could. Subsequent users of the license all seem to really skimp on these fundamentals in favor of chasing empty spectacle, and were never able to reach the same heights. The AA era in particular is interesting because they had a publisher-wide mandate to fill all their games with bespoke signature quote-unquote Bond moments and call attention to them, but none of them even came close to landing the way that finally pulling off Control on 00 Agent did. Michael. That's a good point. I played... I forget what the name of it is. I have it upstairs. I played an EA era GameCube version of a Bond game, and I remember there being sort of secret agent moments, and like they basically had a primitive Arkham style. I don't know if it was a visual mode or if they just had like things in the environment that you could like pick out highlights. You could pick them out and activate them, and then it would do the big set piece, and you had basically no interactivity. It's definitely true that you feel like you're watching a spy.
Yeah.
And not being a spy. So I think, we had similar complaints with, this was the complaint that got lodged against QuickTime events in that era as well, which in, God of War being the sort of prime example was, he's doing something really, really cool. I wish I could do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a similar problem, but it was a necessary design step, I think, to figuring out, to do two things. One, to figure out how to do those things, which I think, take your drink. If you did, culminates in games like Dark Souls, where
I was just about to say it.
The systems get you there. But also at the same time presenting it to a wide audience who wants that experience, right? They want to play the movie experience or whatever, or play the epic experience without having to be, crazy able to execute with their hands.
Yeah, so I don't know.
It
I
takes all
think
kinds.
it does. I don't know. I think it's because it's my designer brain, but I just want to have faith. And Miyazaki said this himself, right? Semi recently or last year, maybe GGC. I don't know. No, it was Dice, I think. The thesis, I think, I haven't actually listened to the whole talk. I don't even know if it's available. I think it was at Dice, but I think the thesis of his whole talk was trust the player. And this, and it was very much an EA driven initiative for those eras that we're talking about. And I do remember those games. In fact, Ian, who we had on the podcast, worked on one of those, I think, from Russia with Love. And there was this mentality that it wasn't about trusting the player. It was about delivering the game to the player with the lowest common denominator. And I think even for players who don't like difficulty, I still think they know a boring game when they see it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, yes, it can get too hard. And I think that's where the accessibility and usability questions come in for a game like Dark Souls, because I do wonder if there's a way for different people to enjoy that game with the way, and they don't have to be so draconian. But I know that's a whole debate that we'll have forever. Long story short, I'm just saying, like, yeah, I mean, I know where those games, why the QTEs come in and all that kind of stuff, and we've played some of the games that initiated that whole thing, but I still think even a casual gamer who's just wanting to enjoy a night, if they're just kind of like on autopilot through like a Call of Duty level or something, I think they know. I think that's what multiplayer does so well at Call of Duty, right? Because you really have to bring some skill. It's not that, you might not, your KDR may not be great, but it's not that hard to take somebody down. So you play multiplayer because you might get a takedown at some point, so
my KDR generally approaches 0. So
yeah, but it's still like it's the time to kill on that is so low that you'll eventually get somebody.
I did in fact do it. What is it called? War or something? The one that was out maybe a year and a half ago.
Warfighter. Wait,
is it maybe? Yeah, I don't know.
Call of Duty Warfighter. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Warzone. It was a Warzone.
Oh yeah, you're talking about we played Warzone. Yeah, that's
played the online.
That's the BR, the Battle Royale version.
Yeah, the Battle Royale version. Yeah, and I got a kill. In fact I had a thing. I think I got like 2 kills, and then almost got a third. And I was like, man, that's amazing. I'm never playing this again.
And then they were bots. Like
no, they were.
I know. I'm kidding. I
did much better in Fortnite when we had bots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think going back to the mail though, he's Mike. Was that Mike, right?
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, Michael. I think Michael makes a couple really excellent points. One, he's so right that the Bond games that came after this one just don't add up. Like, it's so crazy to see how they got from here to there, because I'm not saying making more GoldenEye would be easy, because Rare's awesome studio, and it's really difficult to make a great game. So I'm not saying it would be easy to do, but at least there was like a blueprint you could start from, but it's like to his point, they kind of just went into a totally different direction. And the other point that I think that he made,
and that was EA's bread and butter at the time, right?
They did this thing
make a play the movie. They did it with whatever license they could buy, and made a ton of money doing it. Like, it made a lot of sense for them. So
yeah, it was a strategy. Yeah, but I think in the end, it didn't sustain. Right?
I wonder why they were voted the worst company in America, whatever it was, for years. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
No, not these oil companies.
Yeah.
Not these tobacco companies. EA, makers of fine video game entertainment, are the worst company in the world.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But the other point that he made that is more nuanced and stuff that I love, that is a really great point, is, and I think we talked about it on the series, but the role of animation and the way that they used animation, referring to a previous mail that I read on this episode, just about comparing GoldenEye to games of the era like Quake and Doom. which are really, I guess you could say, more effects based is what they lean into, is visual effects and sound effects. But the enemy characters were really carrying a lot of the feedback through animation in GoldenEye. However they ended up getting there, it seemed all very fairly intentional, though with our guest, Garrett, right? Grant, sorry. Grant, it was like he was admitting that, they were all kind of trying to figure it out as they went. But that he's right that it wasn't, you're not just shooting a cyber demon or whatever, right? You're watching this and implying certain assumptions on what the character's doing and then making decisions based on it. And describing it as a heist is great. Like I love that analogy. But yeah, animations were an unsung hero in a genre that wasn't that focused on good telegraphing and animations.
Yeah, it was very limited in Doom, of course, because it was 2D.
Yeah, there were sprites.
Right?
Yeah,
because they were sprites, you were limited to like how many directions it was going to face and how much it could actually do facing those directions, because the memory adds up really, really fast on systems that didn't have much of it.
Yeah,
and animation, especially with a ton of compression. Although at the time, I think everything was kind of like streamed straight from the cart, probably, and not interpolated because they didn't have the CPU to do it. So everything was like literally playing it all out. But that said, I mean,
that's interesting.
They still had they didn't have a ton of bones on any individual character, and and in fact, this was even joint based. I forget what they call that, but it was hard, linked together, polygons or
like welded
polyhedra.
No,
huh?
Welded?
No, I mean they just weren't. I don't think they weren't skinned, right?
Yeah,
is what I'm thinking about. So it's like linkages of things, and then there weren't like weights that impacted multiple things, but it was like literally just joint transforms and things like that. But and then they just stream that data off the cart, I think, would be what I remember from the time. But yeah. Anyway,
one natural correlation though, like that he mentioned, or that the other male mentioned, was Quake, which was polygonal enemy characters, right? And
right, but also they were coming from
a PC,
from their own, but just from their own approach, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. I mean, I don't like. I think,
I haven't played Quake since it came out, so it's it'd be hard for me to say whether the characters have more to it. I don't think they do.
I don't think they. No, that's my point. Is like, they were
and they went 3D.
Yeah, and they were for the single player at least they were monsters, right? Mainly, and Quake was heavily based on
Driders and things like that.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, it's good. Good debate. I want to go back really quick. I did forget to mention to Blarg's email. I did, because I was going to push back a little bit. I totally understand what he's saying. I will take his advice to heart and think about how to proceed. However, if you recall from the series, I think I did mention that I intentionally wanted to go after the plasma rifle or pulse rifle because I wanted to see why they put it in the game, because I knew it was such an antithetical weapon to the point of the game.
Right.
I wanted to see. So it wasn't, when I said breaking the game, I don't think I necessarily meant, I think I did mean that it felt too easy at sometimes, but also that it was not a design that's meant for the game. So I wanted to see how silly it was. So it was an experiment, but anyway,
that'd be an interesting game to just like cheat and like, okay, give me the maxed out this. How does the game feel when I play with the maxed out this? Okay, now give me the maxed out that. All right, now how does the game feel? That would be an interesting experiment to do. But all right, let's go. Let's try to get at least 2 more in. We've got, we might be able to get to all 4 of these, but go ahead with the next one. It'd be funny.
Okay. Mystery. Okay. Number 4.
Yep.
Okay, subject is just FPS from Mystery Dip. He keeps it simple. Hey, Brett and Tim. With the release of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom on the Switch and the complaints of performance issues, I didn't know about those, there has been a renewed discussion on what acceptable frame rates for games are, for a game for a game. There are those who say anything less than 60 is unplayable. There are those that argue games from the first couple decades of gaming barely achieved 30, and people played those just fine. The former camp retorts that those are limitations of the hardware and the time, and there's no justifiable reason not to maintain 60 in today's environment. There's also a camp somewhere in the middle that says, I don't care what the frame rate is as long as it's consistent. What are your thoughts? And are there any design reasons to choose 30 FPS on a game that's capable of 60 on its target platform? Regards, Mystery Dip.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a big question. So I have a 30 hertz brain. I'll just go ahead and get out and say that. Although I do believe in trying to support 60 hertz, but I don't experience a difference between the two myself. I don't feel it, and I know. I mean, yeah, I really just don't feel it, and so I've always been more of the camp with the games that I've worked on. Although I wish Skyrim ran at 30 all the time on target hardware. That was not a thing that was something we managed. There's lots of reasons for that. Can't go into them and won't go into them. But Eric Johnston at LucasArts, Johnston said, if you're doing 60 hertz, then you're not doing enough in your game. His belief was it's better to have a 30 hertz game with more stuff in it than to have a 60 hertz game. I'm not sure I agree. I think the Ratchet and Clank games all ran at 60. They had plenty of stuff moving all the time in those games. So I think it's possible to do both, but you really have to architect around doing both. And I think in older hardware, we tended to bite off more than the hardware really could chew, or at least didn't build our systems in such a way that they could scale so you can maintain frame rate. I mean, just lots of different reasons, etc. And yeah, I mean, it's a big, complicated question. I personally don't care 30 versus 60. I think I'll have high performance on all my games for a while because I still have a 1080p TV. I don't have any reason to upgrade my TV. They're basically just monitors now, so it's like, well, okay, whatever. I mean, I can't see the difference anyway because my eyes are also going bad. So I don't know. I don't personally care, although in my engineering work, I try to support 60 so that people who do care will feel the difference. That's what I have to say.
This is an enormous topic. And a couple things I'll offer for whatever. Just take it with a grain of salt from my perspective. But I don't agree with Eric, only because I think this question is really highly dependent upon each and every game. Having been a part of this discussion quite a few times now. Over the past few games I've worked on. And really these are enormous decisions, and I think I'm not definitely not saying Mystery Dip is doing this, but one thing I think that the player base often gets loses a little bit of perspective on is that both of these decisions, whether you go 30 or 60, they're both incredibly hard to do. Even maintaining 30 sometimes is hard to do. And because something that I think a lot of players don't really always know, because probably we're not doing a good job at communicating it to them, is that we feel we can make a game chug really easily as developers.
Yes, we can.
we know how to do that. The hard part is maintaining your goal. Pick a goal and then maintain that goal. But as far as once you have that goal, we as developers will tank the game time and time again. Because we are always, to Eric's point, we are always trying to push it to its max. So it's very hard. It's not like oh, 30 versus 60, what's better? It's like, no, it's way more complicated than that.
Yeah,
You don't just pick one and go for it. You got to like have a lot of different decisions. What's the game's focus? What's the point? I personally prefer 60 most of the time if I can get it, and especially in multiplayer games. But if you have a rock solid 30 in multiplayer, it's fine. It really depends on the game. Like, what kind of game is it? Is it a highly accurate, more, semi kind of FPS kind of multiplayer game? Then, you should really focus on 60 because people will feel it. They may not know they're feeling it, but they will feel it. But then if it's more of an experiential game that's really about like, the glamour and the glitz of playing a video game, then 30 will be fine as long as it's, I think I agree with the statement that it's consistent. That's definitely a goal, should be a main goal. Whatever, 90% of the time it's at its 95% it's at its target, on target platforms, etc. But it's so highly dependent on the game, in my opinion. And I just will share and echo that these debates are very heated and very difficult. And I applaud, having worked with many programmers who have to go through the trials and tribulations, especially on Halo with the 60 frames debate. I applaud any programmer who, like Brett just said, may not have a strong opinion, but is willing to support the decision, whatever that decision ends up being. But it really depends.
It's also huge, I feel like, I think this came up in a meeting recently. Like, it's not just an engineering problem to support 60.
Yeah, of course. And it is a village.
Yeah, it definitely, it only takes one village idiot to drop the frame rate, but like a whole village usually has to come roaring to the rescue to try to fix it. And some heroic efforts have been made in places I've worked in the past to get things there. I sometimes will just go like, a frame rate's not good enough. Okay, well, the programmer's making decisions now. You had your chance. You had your chance. All right, I'm now doing it. And they never like the results. So,
every discipline's involved with it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I definitely remember, just trying to sometimes hit 30 on the Starfighter games, which did not perform well. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that we came from PC, totally different architecture, didn't really know. We made so many choices, like writing that game today. I could make that game run at 60 today. I just didn't know how to do it 25 years ago. But I could do it today. But we had tons of help from level design, in particular, like thinking about specifically where the enemies were, when they were coming in, managing that so it didn't get out of hand. A ton of other things, a lot of the decisions we made on the engineering side, we would not make the same way today.
That's a good point. Every discipline's involved with it. Yeah, for sure. That's why I mean, it's such a complicated, like everybody on the team has to be in on whatever your goal is. The other thing I forgot to say is there's the consistency thing, which I think is the most important. And that's where I actually won't give Zelda a pass. Cause the same thing happened with Breath of the Wild. So I'm kind of bummed to read here. I haven't been keeping up on it, but I'm bummed to hear that it's happening again. I do think they could have, I just feel like they should have made different decisions because it's kind of, I think it's unforgivable a little bit for me personally. That
even happened with their the Link's Awakening remake. They had places where they dropped.
Oh, see, that's even crazier.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem very Nintendo to me, but because it's like, it's not about the Switch. It's not about like, oh, the hardware's bad. It's like, no, you make
the hardware.
You're only on one hardware, one piece of hardware. You should find a way. You can find a way. But what the other thing I was going to say is that I did a poor job up front saying is that at the end of the day, the frame rate has all to do with how the experience feels to the player. It's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I still believe in it, in that for the experience you're trying to get, find the frame rate decision that makes sense for them and make it so the player feels like it matches, so it doesn't feel out of place. And again, there's sometimes when it really makes sense for especially multiplayer to be in 60 or whatever it is, but there's sometimes when it's okay that it's not, right? It's just so Yeah. I could, yeah.
Yeah,
The amount of hours I've spent in my life talking about this, I just wasted another 20 minutes or whatever.
The engineer will do something.
Oh,
all right,
nice.
here's email 4. Subject is loot boxes from one, let me see here, Mystery Dip. I was on the road and catching up on my backlog of DGC. Oh, you just wait. In episode 2 of the Mario 64 series, you both were discussing $60 games with loot boxes on top. And he has a quote from one of us. Probably sounds like me. The market for the games is not growing at a pace that can sustain the price they're at. And that's something we'll have to shift if we were to have another generation in 5 years or so. Well, it's been 5 years since that episode. So I'm curious on your take on the state of things now. What has shifted and what another 5 years from now may look like in terms of game costs, price points, and alternative revenue streams. Regards, Mystery Dip.
Oh, you mean the multiple $70 games that just are launching?
Yeah.
Mystery?
The fact that, they all cost more. You mean the whole, turning attach rate on its ear by having GamePass and other, services like it? What is happening is, you think about it. We talked about attach rate.
You mean Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard?
Yeah, I was going to say Microsoft buying up all these things to provide, food for the mill. That's basically $120 a year over the life cycle of the product. If you had somebody who was on Game Pass the whole time, that's like an attach rate of 14 for that person, right? Which is very high. Like that's, top 5 attach rates of all time. It might be in the top 2.
Did you see that? Did you see that recent announcement I read this morning? Microsoft said that their monthly active users for their first-party titles is 150 million people per month on first-party titles. So
what?
I'm just adding that to the
150 million people.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of first-party titles at this point. If you think about it.
Yeah.
So
wow. That seems impossible to me, but okay. I'll take that at face value for now, Tim.
I'm just telling you what I was told.
Okay. I had not seen that today.
Sorry to interrupt, but
no,
it was relevant to what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, my point is that what has happened is we found it has, in the 5 years, we have found other revenue streams, and loot boxes have kind of fallen away because places like the EU have cracked down and said, this is gambling. This is not allowed. You can't do this. So those revenue streams and just backlash, consumer backlash also pushed back on it. There's still some of it for sure. They're still finding other ways to do it, but I think they went so far in that direction that they're kind of swinging back the other way. It's a pendulum, I think, with some of these things. And part of it is a higher baseline price. There's still seasonal stuff. And the market just kind of pulls back when there's a glut of a particular approach, then people pull back from it. We also had a pandemic, so that threw a wrench into a lot of things as well. That's a totally separate issue. But anyway, that's what I can think of at the moment. Are you looking up your 150 million?
Yeah, you made me doubt.
That seems like such a high number to me.
I don't know though. I don't know. Anyway,
I mean, what is this on the Zune? Like, what are you talking about? TikTok has 150 million monthly active users. Oh, U.S. users. Yeah, I don't know. That seems very high. But anyway, whatever it is. Yeah, that's what it says. PC Game Pass players last quarter, 46% increase in PC games. Reached a record 150 million active monthly users on first-party games. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, wow. I still would warrant that if you were to really list out their first-party games at this point.
Yeah, I'm sure it's an enormous.
It's a longer list than we realize sometimes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, yeah, they have all these back catalogs now, right? So
yeah.
And if that merger goes through, although the FTC as well as the EU's equivalent, have both filed objections now to that.
This is so dumb.
Everybody just wants to keep Bobby Kotick in that chair. That's really.
Oh my, please!
All right, let's try to get these last 2 emails in.
I want to play WoW again someday. Can somebody get
Bobby Kotick out?
Okay. Am I next? What's going on?
You're next. Let's move on.
Okay. Emo 5? Oh, my last
5.
one? Oh,
5 and final for the night, yeah.
Oh, okay. Subject, GoldenEye difficulty and objectives from Artemis. Okay, we have all the usual suspects tonight. Yep. This is great. Yep. Hello, devs. Listening to your takeaways episode for GoldenEye made me remember something I thought about when playing it, some of which was less articulated than now because I didn't have the language at the time, but I think I can provide some interesting insight about now. The main thing that stood out was your discussion of the additional objectives in the harder difficulty modes, particularly the 00 agent difficulty. Because this was just one of several ways to play the game, increased difficulty. Because this was just one of several ways the game increased difficulty on you. In addition, we had the typical FPS adjustments of more enemies, with better accuracy and higher damage, and with how some of the cheats were time-based, including those circumstances where the time frame was incredibly demanding, as mentioned by Grant, I feel this was a missed opportunity. I beat the game twice after we got it, once on Secret Agent difficulty and once on 00 Agent. And let me tell you, I found 00 Agent to simply be punishing and unfair. And let me remind everyone that I don't exactly play Dark Souls in ways that do me any favors. Yes, that's true. He makes it hard on himself. I feel the best use of these would have been not as listed objectives in the screen, but you could get details from the briefings along with M and Q in the mission dossiers that allude to these. And that completing the objectives on the higher difficulties could be a better way to unlock licensed characters for multiplayer as well as cheats. Some of these were less cheats and more like Unreal Tournament mutators. You mentioned anyway, like paintball mode. Also, this would serve well as a way to convey that intelligence operative fantasy of being the guy in the field who thinks on his feet and notices these things that were mentioned and finding/accessing them despite the pressure of the situation in the mission. So there's some thoughts about thoughts to milk some discussion out of you. I hope Gross. I hope you appreciate the way we audience members are happy to do part of your job and provide content and discussion topics for you. Keep up the great work. This is such an Artemis.
It is so Artemis.
And thanks as always. P.S. Brett, Boris does say I am invincible in game when he runs away from you after pulling a gun on you.
Sure.
I
killed him so many times that I probably missed it. He wasn't the most important part of the game for me, I have to say. I think that our earlier emailer alluded to some of these things as well, and I do think we sort of talked about how being in the level and seeing the other objectives in place kind of felt more like you were doing the more spy thing. So I think it kind of pairs a little bit with our discussion in that way. I felt like, it was neat that you could see them there, and having seen them in the mission briefings, from whomever. I don't think Moneypenny ever gave you anything useful, but other than that, you had opportunities to see stuff. Although it was a little confusing in that way because they would speak about it because they didn't have text that was different for each version or each difficulty level. So it could be a little confusing from that standpoint. But I agree that there was a sort of cool feeling of like, oh, I found the thing. Like I saw the opportunity. It wasn't pointed out to me. I noticed it, in the world, and I did a thing about it. On the other hand, with a game, of its era that is so sparse, you have to assume that anything that doesn't look like a copy of something from another room is important in that way. So it kind of stands out. So I'm not sure. I think it's a good design point, but I think in the particular instance, it maybe doesn't hold up just because the detail isn't there. So anything with additional detail like stands right out. Like, oh, that must be important. See, it's on that table, like no other room with the same table, right? So there's a lot of competing things I think that contribute.
It depends on I feel like it maybe depended on the objective though, because some were more obvious than
True.
others. Like the one in
Yeah, the
the
one where you had to get the safe key to get in and get your weapons and stuff back was not obvious. I mean, there was a safe there.
yeah,
The
but
one
you
what you
could,
had to do, yeah.
but it was enough information, and I think there was another critical path safe you had to do, right, or something like
Yeah.
that. I feel
Yeah.
so. So it was almost like when I think I did that one accidentally,
I did it accidentally
and
once
when you
too.
discover it, there is a kind of a cool moment to his point there. It's funny because um, for a reason I will not mention because I'm not intending to plug something, but I was thinking about bonus objectives in Jedi Starfighter the other day.
Wow.
Weirdly,
Like you do.
it was based on a question somebody asked me,
Okay.
and um, and I thought to myself, I forgot we had those.
Not only we had them, we also had a hidden one.
Well, no, hidden ones. That's what I meant. The hidden
Oh, okay.
ones. The
All right.
hidden ones. And I thought, I'm really glad we did that. That sounds cool. I like that stuff. I was like, so I had to like search the memory banks. I was like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about it. So a little bit to his point, I definitely am a fan of that sort of like, I guess I'll say like emergent, like, oh, look what I found, right? Like look what I discovered. And it is kind of interesting to me that, and to be honest, when I was reading the mission briefings in GoldenEye, because I guess I don't know, we didn't talk about this feature until later, so I didn't realize that they were talking about objectives for higher difficulties. I think you told me that like halfway through the series, so I didn't even know. So when I was reading it, I was like, this seems like it's just like extra story stuff. Like I didn't even put two and two together. So, the fact that when I found some of those accidental ones, I thought they were kind of what he's saying. I thought they were like a hidden objective because I didn't put two and two together. And I tend to like that stuff. I mean, but to your point, yeah, it's the fidelity of it is it works against it in this case. But
yeah. Well, GoldenEye remaster when? All right, I've got the last one. We can do it. It should be quick. Marathon. So the subject is GoldenEye sales from Artemage. Hey, devs. Grant mentioned in his interview, along with you bringing it up again in your takeaways, how GoldenEye sold more in its third year than it did in its first two combined. The three of you cite this as pure popularity. But as someone who did not have a Nintendo 64 console in his household until Christmas 2000, 4.5 years after the console's release, and just over 3 years after GoldenEye's release on the system, I would argue accessibility of cost is also a major factor. I grew up fairly rural. There was not a lot of prospect for earning spending cash growing up, nor even access to places to spend money. The closest municipal public transit was an hour away on foot, and the closest store of any kind that wasn't a coffee shop or similar was another half an hour beyond that. But with gaming being my primary hobby, you can bet I worked at being able to afford what I could of what I wanted. And the N64 was an inevitable eventuality with my love for Zelda. And with the console coming down in price by half in just 3 years, affordability can make big changes. It's also part of why, even still, there are very few games I get at launch. I mean, I even don't have Tears of the Kingdom right now, and Breath of the Wild is what I consider the strongest Zelda title that I've played, given its exploratory nature, like the original, with a strong story conveyed in game, like we've had since Link to the Past. P.S. Tim, Time Splitters was on Nintendo consoles, at least for the second one, as we had it on our GameCube. So there you go. I split up the PSs, so we each got one.
Okay, great. Ironically, I think I might have played Time Splitters 2 on the GameCube, or some of it.
Fun. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think that we have a tendency with our current privilege lens to not sort of think about the cost aspect of these things. And the price point, of course, was still quite high, and it was in dollars from the 1990s, right? And there's been inflationary pressure since then. One of the things we've talked about before is that game prices have not kept, I mean, now they're starting to catch up, but they had not kept pace with inflation over much of their history. Though there, of course, was a point where it's like they were making so much on per copy, that it was fine, like as long as the audience grew. And then it came to a point where that was no longer true, as we sort of talked about in response to the loot boxes question. But it's a good point to keep in mind that cost accessibility is definitely a major factor for sure. we are also living in a time where there's such a glut of games. There's always games on sale. Like it's, I mean, you could just go and buy games for, $5 to $10 or less, even get tons of great games. You could go to Itch.io and like pay what you want for games in a lot of cases and just fill up your digital library and have enough to play for 10 years, on a few $100
for sure.
Which is wild.
It's a good point. It'd be interesting to see what other Nintendo games did on that same trajectory. I think I'm sure he's right as far as like the convergence of those things. The one thing I'll say is that combined with his point about affordability with a game like GoldenEye, if you are looking for a game that because you hear about the multiplayer or something you can play same screen with your friends or something like that, right? Like versus something that you start, finish, and then are done with. With when affordability is more affordable, and then you also have a game like that kind of in the killer app kind of situation with multiplayer, at least you can see people hearing even through word of mouth, like, okay, I can get one or two games. What's one that is going to give us a lot of social time and a lot of time in general. Maybe has multiplayer. I've heard good things, so it's like kind of a perfect storm there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a good point. And something we should keep in mind when we talk about things like that, because we're definitely in a point. Yeah. I definitely tend to forget that part of my gaming history. Like I mostly played games that were copied on discs from my friends when I started playing games. Like, so, we weren't spending anything. We just happened to know somebody who was dialed in with something like, I don't even remember, somebody who was dialed into like and got stuff that was cracked and like this is Apple II stuff, so going back a few days, but like I didn't even know. Like I had no sense. Like I was 10, so I didn't really have a sense of what they cost or any of that stuff, and it just was my happenstance. So it's a blind spot for me to even think about it, but it's a good reminder for sure. Appreciate it. Well, we did it, sir.
Wow.
10 emails, 72 minutes.
Good job.
That's well done. Well done. Let me take us to our takeout, which I have to scroll all the way up above these emails. I'm buying time while I find my mouse. Okay. Those were, of course, sent to devgameclub@gmail.com. And we love your reviews, too. I checked. No new ones today. But we love them. And if you've been putting them in other podcast infrastructures, let us know. We'd love to read them on air. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or on Twitter at devgameclub, although I often forget. Where you can also find my co-host occasionally at
Tim Longo Jr. with the JR at the end.
Someday one or the other of us may Twitch again. That's not happening at the moment, but never say never again. A little bond for you there. You also can check us out on our Discord. As I said, I won't be on there in the next 10 days or so, but after that I'll be back, and I try to make sure I drop by there every day or two, say hello to folks, and maybe drop information about what's next. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo, our merch store, and the administration of that Discord, with others, including Artemage, is by Mark Garcia. Have fun writing long emails that I can make my co-host read on air this week, and good night.
No, don't do that. Good night!